everybody. I'm gonna full screen my screen real quick and then give you a moment to get to our slides because this is an interactive session. I can't do things without having it some form of interaction. So give me just a moment to share my screen. Share. All right, there we go. Hopefully you can see that screen now. If you see that bit.ly link under Students as Creators, I encourage you to go to it. You don't have to, but you're welcome to go to that link and follow along. The link will also be on other slides, so even if I move forward, if you realize halfway, hey, I wanted access, they are available. That link will be there on the top right-hand corner in just a moment. But today we're really going to be talking about how do we get our students comfortable with the idea of being creators? Because one of the biggest struggles that we run into, of course, as teachers, I was a high school English teacher. A lot of the things that I heard all the time was, what do you want? You know, when I would give them a project or something that they had to create, all of it was about, you know, what I wanted. But I was really trying to push my students to think outside the box and getting them to a place where they are comfortable, where I don't have to, you know, it's not about what I want. I want you to show me what you know. I want you to represent your learning and do that in a way that is creative. And so we're going to dig into what does creative mean, what do students need in order to build that skill set, and all those things. And so we're going to go ahead and dig in. Like Laura said, just real quick, my name is Brittany Miller. I'm an instructional innovation coach here at the Friday Institute, and I get the incredible honor and privilege of working with many schools and districts across North Carolina who are implementing different programs such as social emotional learning, project-based learning, and building those 4 C's: communication, creativity, critical thinking, and collaboration within students. And so I'm talking a little bit about what I did with my students as a teacher, but also what I do with those teachers as well, with the teachers that I work with and support. So that's my Twitter handle. If you want to tweet me or follow me, I'll follow you right back. So we would love to do that as well. I just realized we had a visitor from Egypt joining us, and so we were curious about what time it was. So if you saw that, that's what that was for. The first kind of question that I want us to dig into first is, what skills and dispositions do students need to be creative? And so I want you to think for a moment. We're about to do a poll about what that means. So what skills and dispositions do students need to be creative is the first question I'm going to ask you to respond to. And the next one is, what do we need to embrace? And that could be from your role. You could be a teacher, an administrator, a coach, curriculum specialist. From your role, what do we as an education whole need to embrace in order to empower students to create? And so if you will respond to those 2 questions at this link, you can either type it in or we're going to drop it into that chat window as well. You can, if you're following along in the slides, you're welcome to click on it, but it will bring you where you will have an option to submit those 3 words. If you want to submit more than 3 words, you'll have the opportunity to, once you submit, to submit multiple times. But we'll look at our responses in just a moment. It's going to ask you those 2 questions. What skills and dispositions do students need to be creative? And then what do we need to embrace in order to empower student creation? We'll take a look at those results in just a moment, but I'm going to give you a little bit of time. Cue the Jeopardy music to respond to those 2 questions. If you'll respond in that Mentimeter, which is available if you're following along the slides, which the link to the slides is in the top right-hand corner. You may have to move your video of people if you need to, because it is movable. Respond to those 3 questions, and then we'll capture responses in just about 30 more seconds to respond, and then we'll take a look at some of our results. I'm going to put that, oh, goodness gracious. I'm going to put that link back up. Oh my gosh, I'm clicking all sorts of buttons and not clicking what I need to. Go look at that. There we go. Okay. That is the link to get to our slides. You can also go to Minty.com and use the code, which is instructions at the top. All sorts of different ways to get there. All right, looks like we have some responses in. Let me know if you cannot see my slides. So looking at some of our responses, just to kind of take a look, we have time is a big one. So as people re-enter, it will continue to kind of change the different responses. And this is a word cloud that Mentimeter builds. Let me know if you cannot see what I'm looking at the Mentimeter slides. I kind of messed up what I was trying to display. Laura messaged me if I am showing the wrong thing. So we have time, we have vulnerability. That's a huge one, right? In order to be able to be creative, we do have to be vulnerable. We need self-confidence, we need encouragement so that we feel confident. We need to dig into our interests. We need to be flexible. We need to provide choice, or maybe provide examples of what, what possibilities are. We need the vocabulary. I love that. So in order to be creative, we have to have that grounded vocabulary, right? We have to know the content. We have to know the vocabulary lines in order to make something creative. And we'll dig into what creativity means. But absolutely, you need the background knowledge. You need the fail forward and grit mindset. You need an open mind in order to be willing to take some chances and take some risks with intention. We need some enthusiasm. Interest, support. We need to be thoughtful about our cultural interests too, to be responsive to what our students are bringing into our classrooms, because that's a huge part. If we're really being open to creativity, we have to be thoughtful and intentional and celebratory about our different students. We need empathy and opportunity, right? Students need opportunity. For creativity, we need to provide them the opportunity, all sorts of different things. And so looking at our list, we have support. They need support. They need that encouragement. So absolutely, all of these positive things that we can put into place, but also what students need. They need that support. So let's look at our next question. What do we need to embrace in order to power student creation? So, right, we need our own confidence, right? We need the confidence to know that they can do it. We need confidence in ourselves and the willingness to give it a try. We need to be open-minded. We need real-world curriculum, right? That's grounded in who our students are and the world around us. We need a culture of creativity within our schools and within our classrooms where students are allowed to take risks with intention, like I said, to release that control. We need flexibility and innovation and to kind of embrace the ambiguity, right? We have to embrace that what our students create may not be what we had in mind, but that might be the best thing that we did not anticipate. And there were many times in having open projects that students will go because they have the opportunity. They can do all sorts of different things. They need patience. We need patience and encouragement. And again, we need to address those multiple learning, and we need that empathy. We need to look beyond our biases and beyond what we think it should look like, and being open to what a student creates and what a student thinks, and allowing them to express in the way that they learn. And so those are all huge things, right? That's not a little thing to ask as a teacher or as a student. Creativity and really embracing a culture of creativity in our classrooms takes a lot a lot for us, because we do have to relinquish that control. We have to be open to new opportunities and new possibilities. And we also need to empower our students to know that it's a safe place for them to take those risks. So there's a lot that needs to happen in order to make that happen. And so I'm going to hop back to our other slides. I don't know if I need to combine these. Okay, here we are. And so those results will remain there. And Mentimeter, I'll have a link for that if you're interested in that tool. It's one of my favorite web tools, just as a quick plug. But that kind of sets us up, right? We need to be thinking a little bit outside the box as educators, and help our students think a little bit outside the box as well. Because every child is an artist, right? I love this quote from Pablo Picasso. You've probably heard it before. It's used regularly when students are talking and teachers are talking about creativity. The problem is how to remain an artist as we grow up. That is my 9-month daughter, who is playing in laundry, in case you're curious, which is one of her favorite things to do right now. And I look at her openly willing to take risks, right? She will be crawling, which has been a recent discovery, and starting to pull up on things, and she's not afraid to think outside the box. And when she gets a little bit older, she's not going to be afraid to color outside the lines, or to just be an artist. She even will move things around. We started playing with food to basically finger paint, and they're not afraid. When a child is born and when we're really young, we're not afraid of the many things that we're afraid of when we get older. And so while a lot of people talk about how we need to build creativity, and we need to teach creativity, what we're really talking about is we need to revisit what it's like to be really little and not to be so afraid. We need to help address all the things that have caused students through experience, through school experience, that have caused them to be afraid of taking risks, that have caused them to learn school and to be really good at giving what the teacher wants. And some of our higher performing students actually are really struggle the most with creativity, to thinking outside the box, because they're so good at figuring out what the teacher wants and articulating what the teacher wants, and not necessarily building what they want or building what is a true expression of their learning, right? So instead of thinking about it as I'm teaching these skills, it's really I'm reopening that creative side. Because we are all artists, we're all creative. And even if we tell ourselves that we're not creative, it's the same story as telling, a girl, I myself used to tell myself I was bad at math. I was never bad at math, and it has nothing to do with the fact that I'm female. We're not naturally bad at math, right? It's just a story that was told to us through experiences, even with the best of intentions through school. And so what we're not doing, we're not reteaching those skills. We're reopening that creative side. We're building that confidence that they are creative, that they can come up with their own original ideas, because they're human and humans are creative. We are born with the innate ability to learn and to grow and to create. And so that is the beauty of being human. So how do we reopen those avenues for a student? And one thing that I want to ask is a big part of this, and before you talk about anything else, is taking an outside observer's look at your classroom culture. Is your classroom conducive to creativity? Are students allowed to take risks, even small risks? Are students allowed to make choices? Are students allowed to openly share what's going on either in their lives, and they don't feel like they have to hide a part of themselves? Because again, that confidence in knowing who they are and being able to represent who they are is a huge part of being creative and thinking outside the box and being able to be comfortable with thinking in those spaces. So classroom culture, I just like to kind of start with that it is a huge component of your, of when you want students to be creative. If students are afraid of being creative, if you hop straight to PBL and it's not working, maybe taking some time to build those relationships, to build that comfort level between you and your students and students between students, will help build the culture that will allow creativity to happen and to grow naturally. Because I really like this quote about creativity. I'm not saying there's one golden quote for creativity, because if this was in person, I would have us writing our own descriptions of creativity. But I like this one because a lot of the times creativity is bucketed into the arts. And it, with the best of intentions, it is bucketed into the arts, that the art teacher teach kids how to be creative, or the theater teacher, and the music teacher. And that makes sense. I mean, they are the arts, and you do have a more open opportunity for students to be creative within the arts, but it is not limited there. And so I want you to take a moment, I'm not going to read it to you, but take a look at this description, and just kind of think about it within your context, whether you are any kind of teacher or you are an administrator. Just take a look at this description and think about, where can this act of creation happen for my students? And we'll take, I'll kind of open it up for questions and discussion in just a minute. So you can kind of share in the chat. Some people are sharing some things as well already. Where do you see this act of creation that is described here on this slide with your, within your role? Or what do you like about it? What do you not? If there's something you disagree with it, nothing is perfect. Yep, PBL and STEM classrooms. In choices where students produce work. Labs, absolutely, right? So if they're doing something where they're applying some science knowledge, they have to understand and synthesize and critically think, reflect, react, right? And having students choose what they produce is a huge part of just building. We're going to talk about that in just a second. It's a step toward that creativity, is providing that choice. Yep, student stations. Because again, providing that choice allows for that creativity, allows for that freedom of choice. Yeah, Media Center does have an opportunity, and and a lot of times our arts, again, are looked at the place where creativity happens, because they do get to take a step away from curriculum sometimes, a little bit easier than some are strict content, but I still feel like there are ways that we can integrate. But yes, you can do a lot of fun things in the Media Center, small group activities. People synthesize when engaged in active listening, absolutely. So active listening is the process of fully listening to someone and clarifying before moving forward in a conversation that what I hear is, and what I understand is what that person is trying to portray. Yep. Kids get excited and more engaged in STEM. Absolutely. I mean, really, every child, again, is born with a capacity to create. And when we have the opportunity where we build that confidence, you see them open up. Tessellations and patterns, that's an easy integration of arts and math. Yep, writing a song and vocabulary. Absolutely, you can do some really neat stuff with having students write raps and songs using vocabulary words, stories, all sorts of different things. Again, when you open up that opportunity, you can do all sorts of really interesting and neat experiences for students. And some of you already shared a bunch, and so you can continue to share as well. I'll be sharing some other strategies and ideas. But this is really kind of the heart of what I want to get to. This is the creativity challenge, and I challenge you all with these 3 questions and the things that we need to consider and things that I have used both as a facilitator with professional learning with the teachers, but also with my students as well. I came to a moment where I realized that my direct instruction was only helping a percentage of my students. Only my students who are good listeners and good note takers were taking my direct instruction, and it was actually absorbing. But there was a good percentage of my students that I felt like I was missing because they needed the hands-on. And I'm actually one of those people. And so like I started to realize that I am not a good teacher for who I am as a learner. And so that's a problem, right? So one thing that I challenged myself was, how do I turn learning over to my students as quickly as possible without confusing or overwhelming them, right? How do I give enough direct instruction and set up an activity or a lesson well enough to where they feel like they can do it on their own with as minimal impact or direct instruction from me? But I don't want to confuse them and I don't want to overwhelm them, right? So there's a balance there. They still need some direct instruction. They need enough structure for them to be successful. But that was one thing that I really started to challenge myself. And I'd actually put a time limit that I would not talk longer than 10 to 15 minutes at a time. And what I have like an internal clock now that tells me you've been talking too long. Like, this makes me uncomfortable. My internal clock is buzzing because I don't normally even talk this long, but unfortunately online learning is kind of what you have to do. But my second one is, how can I provide them the opportunity to discover content on their own without sacrificing my content goals? And so how do I make sure, as an English teacher, I have a strong curriculum? As a content teacher, you have strong curriculum. How do you not sacrifice the things that you have to do and the information that you have to cover, but give them the opportunity to discover it on their own? And so that takes a lot of intentionality, and it takes a lot of planning of where these different standards intersect. Where can I cross them with other teachers, or cross them within a project where I'm hitting multiple standards or multiple learning goals within one space? And how can I turn that over? And so I will give you some ideas in just a moment. And then my third question is, how do I assess the process and product fairly? And this was a huge eye-opener for me the first couple times I started doing creativity activities. Because, again, like I mentioned earlier, what students create may be something entirely that you did not expect. But if it gets to the content and it gets to what students had learned and are achieving the standards and they're following their own learning, then I shouldn't have a problem with what they created, right? And so that's where the balance comes, is when students start working on creative projects. The mistake sometimes we make with the best of intentions is grading the pretty project, or the project we anticipate, or the project that we have an example for or had in mind when we created the project may be graded better with best our intentions than someone who did something outside the box, or maybe didn't have the same art skills. And does that really matter? And so I think one thing that we have to keep in mind when students are working on creative projects, if we truly want to balance and build their confidence and start really getting them to build that, I just kind of like to throw that out there, that how do I assess that process and product fairly and check my biases at the door? How do I make sure that if my students, if I are building something that is representative of who they are or of their culture or their identity, am I being responsive and thoughtful and not grading that or do, you know, unfortunately building in those implicit biases by accident, right? And so I think that's really important to keep in mind, that if you are opening up the opportunity for students to create a way and express themselves and express their learning, we need to be very thoughtful about our biases and looking at the what they create and making sure that that product, and I'm grading the process in the product fairly for all of my students. So I just think that's an important piece. I'm gonna pause real quick here to kind of check the chat. Laura, I didn't know if there was any questions that have popped up or thoughts to share along the way.
Folks are sharing good resources and engaging in the chat. So I think we are, we're kind of addressing them as we go, sharing resources and links and things like that. So I think we're
wonderful.
Yeah, we're doing well over here.
Okay. Yep. So rubrics are a huge part. So I see rubrics are being shared because that is a huge component. What I was going to talk about next. What are some ideas we have? There are so many different directions that we can go in for this particular avenue of student creativity, but there's 3 different steps that I feel like are really important. We can't just dump kids at student creation in the same way that if we were working through Bloom's, we would not start at create. I would not make the assumption that my students create something if they have not analyzed it, if they have not understood it. And I'm not saying that they have to understand and analyze it from my direct instruction. I'm just saying they have to go through the process of understanding and analyzing in order to create. So we have to be thoughtful about that. The other part of it is that in order to create, students have to have the confidence in themselves that they can make a decision and that I will be supportive of the decisions that they make. And to build the agency, so I'll kind of go through these different components. The first step is how do we build that student confidence? I think starting simple and baby steps is the best way to kind of build that culture of creativity that was mentioned in chat, but as well as mentioned throughout the session. We have to get students comfortable with each other and confident with themselves and confident with me, that they can make choices in their learning and they can make good choices in their learning and be able to do that. So mini maker activities, mini STEM activities, to get them comfortable with the concept of creating, of critically thinking and collaborating, and it just builds all those skill sets. Choice boards, again, choice boards to me is kind of the first step of personalized learning. The first step of creativity is providing choice, whether it is choice boards, learning menus, whatever you want to call it. There's many different ways to provide choice to our students, but giving them a list of things that they can choose from that I can go into, and I could even make suggestions if that student is more hesitant about making choice or they get overwhelmed. I'm able to help them identify, well, you're really, really good at this area. Maybe that's a good place for you to start, a good choice for you to start with. But providing that choice in the resources that they're exposed to, and also choice in the act of whatever the application of that learning. Station rotation is another great way to provide students choices, provide a bit of differentiation. Station rotation can be a great differentiation opportunity. I also do flex learning stations, which is not everybody goes through, and this group goes through the 5 and they have 5 minutes at each station, but I'll put a timer up, and based off of where the students are or where they feel they are and what they like to do and like to learn, they can go to the different stations and they could spend the whole time at one station, or they could do multiple stations. And they can kind of follow their own pathway of learning through the different stations instead of having it specific. And of course, you have to design with that in mind. But again, providing that choice, whatever that looks like. Building that community. I don't think there's no harm in building community with your students. I feel like that is time invested, because the more time that I invest, especially in the beginning of the year, in building those relationships and building that community, is less time that I'm going to spend with disciplinary issues in my classroom. And that's the truth of it. If students are comfortable and respectful of each other and respectful of me, and I'm respectful of them, then we have a good, safe community for all of our students. Then I may not deal with some of the other behavioral issues that may arise in a classroom that is not as, that has not spent the time building that community. We have to be thoughtful of that. Self-affirmations are things that we tell ourselves, right? What I was talking about earlier about, like, I thought I was bad at math, but I'm not bad at math. And so those are the things that society tells us, implicit biases tell us, our parents, may tell us, or we may tell ourselves based off of experience. And so how do we start having students revisit those lines? Like, when I hear a student that says that they're bad at math, am I doing something about it? Am I turning that thought around? That no, you're not bad at math. You just don't have that skill yet, or you don't know that yet. It doesn't mean that you're not going to. It doesn't mean you're not able to. It means that you're just not, you haven't learned it yet, or getting students to just think or turn around that mentality that they're bad at something, that they're bad at drawing, that they're bad at those sorts of things. So self-affirmations to turn around the positive mentally, and there's, maybe some opportunity there. Acknowledging the process as a teacher, baby steps, every little process is a move the right direction, and to chunk large tasks into smaller manageable pieces. So if you're going through a huge project, either students can chunk it down, like, what am I going to do in these different times, or you yourself helping them break those tasks. Because some of our students, especially kind of our perfectionists or our high anxiety students, may see a large project and be immediately overwhelmed. They have to build that self-confidence. Sometimes just having, it can help build our confidence when we can successfully complete the parts to a larger picture, right? The next piece is that student agency. So once I feel competent in making decisions in my learning, even small ones, and I feel celebrated and I feel like things are going well within my learning, my next step is, can I advocate for myself? And that's where student agency lives. Student agency is the ability to say, I know how I learn. I know how I learn best, and I'm able to say what I'm learning, why I'm learning it, and how maybe I want to learn. If there's a method that isn't working for me, can I articulate to my teacher what I need? That's a part of student agency, and that's advocacy piece. But you need confidence in order to speak up, right? So you can continue with the choice menu boards, self-guided stations, start building those STEAM and STEM maker. Those start working on that agency and being able to speak to my peers about my thoughts, my thinking, my problem solving. But I think an important piece of student agency is reflecting about learning. Can I articulate, if I were to ask a student in the middle of activity, what are they learning? Why are they learning it? What do they like about learning it? What do they wish was different? Getting them to pause and actually think about the active learning process can really do a lot for getting students to think about learning in a totally different way. And it's something that we probably skip over and don't think about in our daily run of class, is that we may assume that students are thinking about learning, but chances are they're probably not actively thinking about it. And as teachers, providing that ongoing feedback, providing that, acknowledging that progress, even the small ones, can help build that confidence and build that agency. And the last piece is, once students have that confidence, in order to be able to create, and they have the agency, then that's where student creation can really happen. And you'll hit less of the walls of, I don't know what you want, or I'm not creative, you know, those sorts of things, those are the project-based learning or problem-based learning projects. They have design-based learning, which is usually you are given a problem, you have to come up with a prototype. It's a whole process, a prototype to address a particular problem, either within the community or world, allowing students to create what they want as a final product. So that's kind of student-led products where they know their learning goals, but what they do with those learning goals and how they learn them and how they represent them can be very different. Giving students the opportunity, giving them their standards or giving them your learning goals and what you need to accomplish within a particular time, and allowing students to track their progress, to turn that over to them, and getting them to assess themselves, giving them the rubric at the beginning of a project or assignment, and am I learning or representing what I'm trying, what I'm supposed to learn? And that can change the whole conversation when a student can assess themselves and they say, I'm not hitting these marks here, or, and I've seen student portfolios at an elementary school with a little second grader who opened up her folder next to me and was going through, showing me her work and speaking articulately, what a funny word to get stuck on, articulately about their learning, that they can say, I'm really good, or I'm really successful with this vocabulary list. And I really struggled with my, I think it was, math problems as a worksheet that she was showing me. But the thing that was really important is that she said, but I'm working on it. But I'm working on it, right? It's not that I'm bad, it's that I'm working on it. So that's kind of part of it, is how do we turn the learning over to our kids in a way that still meets our learning goals and still tackles the reality of high stakes testing, that still has students learn what they need to learn, but in a way that they want to learn it, and that it builds and expands our curriculum goals beyond what we even have. So I am running short on time here, but I just want to do one final thought, is to beware the Grecian urn. This is a wonderful article, which I'm going to give you the link to at the very end as well. It's a blog post from Jennifer Gonzalez on the Cult of Pedagogy about working with a teacher who was having students do creative projects in which they were designing their Grecian urn, but there was no actual learning for the students. They were creating, and if you were to poke your head in there, they were excited and they were creating all their Grecian urn designs, but all of the content knowledge of teaching them the background, the culture, making literacy connections. There were so many opportunities there to make content connections that had not occurred in the actual design and the actual creation of the Grecian urns for students. So when you asked a student what they were doing, they were just creating a Grecian urn, and the background component had not happened. And so one final thought is, when you're having students create, beware of the Grecian urn, where we're doing something fun and it's hands-on and it's interactive and students are excited, and that's all wonderful. But if there's no content learning, if there's no tie back to what students, are supposed to be learning back to our learning goals, then that's a miss. And so even if we're doing something fun and interactive and hands-on, we always have to make sure, even with the best of intentions, sometimes we just do things because we get excited as teachers, to really make that learning tangible and connected for the students. So that's a wonderful article. I highly recommend reading it. But that is kind of the end of my presentation, and I encourage you to expand the creator in all students and be open to all the opportunities that may come with it. And so these are at the very end, that link up there is also still live. It's our presentation. There's a couple resources that I just wanted to provide as well. But that is kind of the closing, and I'm going to open up to any questions that came along the way. And thank you for following along. If there's any last questions. Oh, yes, sorry.
One person mentioned in a question about how you might go about building that classroom culture if the culture is you're coming into a broken culture, or students don't feel like they have the autonomy and the confidence to be creative. So if you want to just kind of touch on that.
Absolutely. In culture, I could speak about the classroom culture for a week, you know, because it is an important component of, regardless of what you're doing in a classroom, your classroom culture is a huge piece of everything that you do. And so, especially if you, if your students are within a school that has a more negative classroom culture, or they're coming from other classrooms where they don't have creative opportunities, that can be a huge piece. And so there's a lot of different things that you can do. Some of them that we've mentioned, I'll go back in the slides, of little things that they can do to get students to rethink the stories that they tell themselves, talking about self-affirmations, talking about what stories does society say about you as a creator? What do you feel? And how do we address those? Building, you know, just, you know, you see the videos of student teachers like high-fiving or hugging or like interacting with their students in the way that they want to interact at the beginning of as students are coming in the door. You may have seen those on Twitter, where one student likes to high five, the other student likes to have a funny handshake with the teacher. That they can say, or even if you like have a list, like some teachers have a list of different ways that they can say hello. Just providing that choice. Tell students that as they're entering my classroom, what they want and what they need is important to me. And so I'm going to, if they choose high five, I'm going to high five. I'm going to give that student what they need, but I want to interact with them, and I want to build their confidence, right? Taking time to get students to talk to each other. And even if you're a, you know, a content teacher, again, like, you know, English teacher here, ways that you can interact and integrate the arts, because arts are expression, you know, getting students to act things out, to talk about things that are real from, you know, their lives, is just an important part of building that community, because the idea is that your students are part of your community, and they need to be celebrated and have the opportunity to share who they are, and to feel from the gate you're providing them that choice. So I'm out of time, and so again, I could talk for a week about ways that you could build your culture, but I will also maybe send some additional resources on that particular question afterwards as well. And I think Laura just dropped in a YouTube video maybe of them.
This was an article, there is an article, but there's also a video about how when you give students, you actually give them some constraints, they tend to end up being more creative, because sometimes students can feel overwhelmed with the endless amount of possibilities. So if you're thinking about a starting project, maybe putting some constraints or limitations on it, that you can only use these materials or these supplies, it actually does help build their capacity to be creative. The video just shows the example of when you give a student or a child a cardboard box, all the things that they create and they make with just a simple cardboard box. So that's just kind of a quick little video if you're thinking about building culture and getting started in conjunction with what Brittany was saying at that time. So it just popped into my head.
Yes, and thank you for sharing that, because it is true. And students need structure. Children need structure to be successful. And so when I say creative projects, you know, if a student is comfortable and confident to go totally out of the box on their own, I'm open to what they have come up with, but also providing some choices and some constraints, depending on what I'm doing, to build that confidence, to build that agency. And that's where, when students are confident and comfortable in the two other areas, they can start really thinking and pushing the limits. But But thank you for your time. And if you have additional questions or resources, please feel free to continue to share them. But I appreciate your time today with me. That was kind of fast and furious, but.
Yes, thank you so much, Brittany. We had a very engaging chat going on. So I would encourage you, I will leave the meeting open for a few minutes after we close here at in about 3 minutes, but I'll leave the chat open if you want to click the links or bookmark any of these resources. I did want to make you aware of a couple things before we wrap up, and that is, like, Brittany, let's see, I'm gonna
stop sharing. Hold on.
Yes, I'm gonna switch over to myself. Just a couple things here before we wrap up. So this presentation will be available via our YouTube channel if you want to go back and grab any of the resources that Brittany has shared. I did provide the link to her presentation in our chat, but it's also available on the conference schedule, so you can grab it there as well. Brittany would appreciate if you would fill out an evaluation for this session. That's also linked on the conference schedule. It's just 2 quick, short questions providing her some feedback. And then it also helps us continue to grow this conference and what you need, which leads us to, if you are looking for CEU renewal credits, we will provide a certificate for that completion as long as you have completed the session evaluations of those that you've attended, and then also the closing conference evaluation. So those are both very key components into receiving that certificate. Information on that final evaluation will be sent out this evening, if not first thing tomorrow morning, as soon as the conference closes. And other than that, we would just encourage you to continue to check out the sessions today. We have a session every 50 minutes. Our closing keynote will start at 5:00 p.m. Eastern. So if you are available and able to join us the rest of this afternoon, we would love to have you. But I think that is all I have. Like I said, I will leave the meeting open for a few minutes here for you to continue to engage in the chat. But otherwise, I hope I see you guys the rest of this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.